It's been 7 years since I've really talked about the Power Rangers reboot movie. There are things I do like about it, and it had potential. And I always trying to say, why, like, what was really wrong with the movie? Like, what was those elements that just tipped it over the end and it fell in the line more of like, this is kind of a generic superhero movie and nothing really that special? Because Power Rangers, even though it is a part of the superhero genre, it has done many unique things to the superhero genre. The powers are mixed in a fantasy technological element and has different themes here and there versus like other traditional superheroes that focus on one or the other element, things like that. And then there were just tons of things that were lost because it didn't follow the original series. Ultimately, it couldn't balance everything all together to make a cohesive story.
Reviving with the grid.
The thing that I really didn't discuss about back when I did my review on it was the whole reviving aspect of Zordon. Now, the reason why Zordon originally wanted the Rangers to become Power Rangers was use this energy to revive himself. Because remember, he had died at the start of the film and he was semi-rescued and stored into the ship's computer, and really the only way to bring him back was this one time. The problem is, this doesn't make any sense logically. Basically, internally, the story wants you to see that, okay, the Rangers, have to become the Power Rangers the first time. Their release of energy gives the ability to bring back Zordon, because Billy died, and they use that energy to revive him. But it's just a Deus Ex device, and basically a way to revive people forever. Because if you really think about it, so then simply disconnect the powers and find new people so you can keep reviving people over and over and over again. That's the reason why the whole grid reviving thing shouldn't have been done. And I know Power Rangers in the series has used the grid to do fantastical things, but the problem is every time you do that, you bring in problems, just like here. If you want to say, well, it's only for the initial thing, well, then Zordon's team, if they were the first Power Rangers, couldn't exist in the first place because it would have been used up there.
Annoying advertisements.
Now, I know advertisement is, a thing that happens in life. There's positives and there's negatives. As long as it's not intrusive into the movie, it's fine. But when you build it into the actual movie as a plot device, not only is it because it became such a focal point, you're robbing the moment of this dramatic reveal of the Zeo Crystals are underneath this building. Instead of us thinking about that, we're all thinking behind our head, how much they pay for this advertisement. We have this moment of Rita coming in and eating the Krispy Kreme food and all that other stuff, on top of which the movie doesn't know what it wants to be, funny or serious, which brings me to the next section.
Not serious, then too serious.
Now, obviously, we all know Power Rangers is a corny series. It can be serious, but it has a mixture of both. The movie was clearly trying to be a very serious movie, but then at the same time, they're like, oh, wait a minute, we're trying to adapt MMPR, which is funny. Quick, let's put in goofy moments, and it just does not work. You cut out Bulk and Skull's character, but then you have all these idiotic moments like the whole cow joke at the start of the film, which got Jason in trouble. You have the Krispy Kreme moment with Rita, and all this other obnoxious stuff, all while you're trying to be a serious film. Obviously, the movie is running on the coattails of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There was just no balance. The kids show was able to accomplish this, but the $100 million plus movie couldn't.
The Zeo Crystals.
Why was the Zeo Crystals in the film? I know they're used as the MacGuffin and the core reason why everyone came to Earth, but you shouldn't have introduced something like this so early on. I understand you want to set things up and build a universe of Power Rangers movies. That's fine and all, but Marvel has done this problem too, where we're gonna, bring in a new Marvel superhero character, but at the same time, you're using the very first movie to not only introduce us to a Marvel hero, you're gonna put in 2 and 3 other Marvel heroes at the same time that also have to be introduced.
Why does this keep happening to me?
Why are you stuffing so much stuff into the movie when MMPR has so many things that you can adapt and use and create it into a movie? The Green with Evil arc. That in itself would be its own movie. You could have came up with some other reason why Rita and Zordon came to Earth. When we were ready to wrap up MMPR's story, then bring the Zeo Crystals in as a MacGuffin, and then do that as a final thing. We are here for an origin story of the MMPR cast. We didn't need the baggage of the Zeo Crystals, and ultimately, the movies didn't even use them. So basically, they were a moot point and could have been with something, anything else.
No main fight.
I think this is the most complained thing about the reboot movie, is that there was no main fight. Now, I understand you have to build up these characters. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, but the whole reason why we're here is to see a Power Ranger fight. And yes, we did get a Zord fight, but that's only half of what we're supposed to see. Especially after one of the core elements of the entire story was they couldn't figure out a way to morph. Now, in the original series, that did happen a few times here and there, but it wasn't a main focal point. We finally get to see the moment of truth. They morph, they get their new powers, and they had a 1-minute fight with generic monsters. And that was probably one of the main reasons why people hated the film. Oh yeah, we had the Zord fight, but again, we've seen so many giant fights as it is, from Godzilla, especially with Transformers at the time running its course. And it was the wrong call, and we needed a much longer main fight with the Rangers.
Green Ranger plot hole.
For the reboot, they had Rita be the Green Ranger, and something happened that turned her. But the power coins have the ability to choose and pick who are worthy, like from the series. Why doesn't the green coin shut off, stripping Rita of her power? This is the problem of changing things from the show. She made the coin in MMPR where this plot line would work, but not here. So the green coin has to function as the other 5. If you start trying to fix this like, oh, she used her magic to corrupt the coin, then why doesn't she do it to the other 5? She's OP thanks to the movie needing her to do all the jobs that her villain team is supposed to do.
Not the characters.
Now, this was my main issue with the movie. Now, no matter what you say, these were not the characters. Besides Billy being the smart one, everything else about the characters was changed. From their personalities, backgrounds, the way they interact with each other, to their appearances. Nothing was the same. And I was saying to myself, why weren't these guys just original characters instead of playing the MMPR cast? That's a rhetorical question. I understand why they did it, because it has to be recognizable. It has to be MMPR. It's the most iconic. But you chose not to do the characters. And that was a very big disappointment for me. I didn't hate this cast at all. I thought the actors were perfect. They were fun. Why didn't you guys just make an original movie? Of course, do MMPR. Do that movie, get those characters done and established and not, and then if you wanted to bring up an original team from this movie universe, go right ahead. And you could have casted these guys and played original characters, and you wouldn't have been locked into the Zordon stuff, the Rita stuff, the MMPR stuff. You could have went gung-ho and done so many different things with these original characters if you wanted to do an original story. That's the reason why I hate reboots and remakes in the general sense, because, oh, we're going to see a reboot, but you don't want to see the same thing, right? That's the reason why it shouldn't exist. We already had the series. We already have the characters. Reboots and remakes should be saved for movies that fail or TV shows that fail, so that you give them a second chance to succeed, see why they failed, and fix them. Doing a reboot is ultimately a rehash, and when you do things like this where you change everything to be more original, then why not do an original story?
The designs.
But probably the most annoying thing out of everything was the designs. Now, I understand from a financial perspective, why would you want to change things? Because again, if you simply brought everything from the TV show in, then you're not going to be able to sell anything because everything's identical. We already had the products. I understand it from that perspective, but they went so far in a different direction where it was totally different, but then on top of it, generic and ugly. Now, people complain when they alter things a lot of times. Look at the RoboCop remake / reboot movie. No one loved that black suit of his because it just felt like, oh, generic dude from another futuristic show like Time Cop. He would fit totally in the Time Cop movie. That's not RoboCop. We expected to see RoboCop. I get it that the original suits would look very cheesy, but usually the problem when it comes to these type of arguments is you add detail. I'm remembering from the days of the old X-Men films. Remember when they made fun of the yellow spandex in the film? And I'm saying to myself, there's nothing wrong with the comic book suits. The only reason why they wouldn't look good in live action is if you just simply translated them directly into the real world, but not adding any detail. The MMPR designs and stuff would work perfectly fine if you just simply added on and fleshed out the detail to the suits. Instead, everything was ugly, particularly the Zords. It's like they saw Transformers and they were like, do that and then put in MMPR, and it doesn't work. Overly complicated, bizarre, like the Mastodon was half spider, weird things like that. They were the solid colors, but then they didn't have, and they had details in all the weird, odd places. When I was saying to myself, what was wrong with the original designs? They were blocky and boxy, and that's really the main complaint you can give the original designs, but they had all the core elements there that you could just simply extrapolate and just say, all right, we're going to change a few things here and improve on it, but still keep the core concept of the design. The transforming aspect of the Megazord was completely different. They wanted, the pterodactyl to be wings, but then we have other bizarre designs, like the Power Morpher doesn't even show up. And what they came out with the toy was ridiculous. It was like, let's just rip off a Kamen Rider belt and call that the Power Morpher, when the original Power Morpher was an excellent design on itself. It reflects an egg, and the lights, it had Power Rangers in the front. It was a simplistic design. It reflected Zordon with its Z on the back and the colors of the Rangers. It worked. It worked as a belt buckle. It wasn't intrusive. The Power Coins in the TV show looked far more cooler and interesting and more older relics from the era they came from than what the show did. Yeah, they were crystals, but they just looked like cookies from the distance. You couldn't see the animals that they were supposed to be. That was the worst thing of all. I couldn't tell who was the Tyrannosaurus, who was the Mastodon, who was the Triceratops, who was the saber-toothed tiger. For anyone who was new to Power Rangers, from the distance, the only thing that was recognizable was their colors. When the Power Coins are iconic and they made them worse. Then you had the very generic putties, which were just simply rock creatures that any other fantasy movie could have came up with. Goldar being literally made of gold and crappy looking. He had no design, no nothing. He's perfect for a Hasbro figure that doesn't want to be painted to save on cost. Generic, boring, and not the Goldar from the TV show. Then you have the Ranger suits. Some ideas were fine. I did like the idea of, the diamond chest had an animated effect. That could have been a cool way to show the suits taking extensive damage, showing flashing and other things, or, showing a weakness of the suits where, damage would appear. Other than that, the suit was like all over the place. It was supposed to be this whole organic thing, and it was very bizarre when it was like, we just don't want to go into spandex. Like, no one says you have to do the spandex, but you could have made it proper, ordinary armor, battle armor that would work. The MMPR suits just needed more detail, but you could have stuck to their basic designs. And the helmets were the most generic thing of all. Each of the MMPR helmets, you know what their animals are. They're very distinct. They look virtually the same from a distance, bar the colors. The movie fails to make them distinct at the same time making them overly complicated. The only design that I really liked from the movie was Zordon's. It kept the essence of what Zordon was. Big head guy that's stuck in a tube, in this case a wall, and it was a cool effect, but it still had the essence of what MMPR did. But I think the worst design had to go to Alpha. You did that with the Zordon's team. They were all aliens. They came from different worlds, which is fine. That's cool. But then you had Alpha, which is supposed to be a robot, be an alien, and on top of it, a generic alien, because you kind of just did that, we're going to just give him really thin arms and a long neck, and the only resembling thing was, the saucer. But then again, so it just made him kind of look like a generic 50s alien. So he was generic, at the same time ugly, at the same time wrong. From all these things, that is the reason why the movie failed. I understood what it was going for. You wanted to flesh out the characters. And I agree. There were characters in MMPR like Jason who didn't really get fleshed out. But the core of the character wasn't here. He was not a karate instructor. He was a delinquent / he did bad things, which involved the cops. So you had all these alterations from the characters, from the looks, from a very convoluted plot line. Certain things here and there worked within the original plot line of MMPR. Like, I didn't mind the whole Rita was the Green Ranger. I didn't mind Zordon was a Ranger either. I think if the original show had more time or a budget, I think those are things that they would have come up to. But everything else, all the other changes were drastically too much for people who loved the show and the people who fell off over the years of not watching PR, and of course the people who were watching like Marvel movies, DC movies. They had expectations as well, and it just failed on all the fronts. I know that, you know, making this movie was difficult because you have so many different things, but ultimately you are making an MMPR movie and you have to stick to the MMPR formula. Obviously stuff in the TV show will not work 100%, but that 5% that you have to change to work into a feature film, that was all that you really needed. But instead of doing that, they said, we're going to just do 50% of what MMPR is, and then we're going to do our own thing. If this robot was not Alpha 5, then I wouldn't have the expectations to see him be a robot and not a generic alien. Of course, we're going to get a new PR universe, reboot, whatnot. I hope they take this into consideration where, yes, of course, come up with your own new thing, come up with your characters, but do not deviate from the core element of PR. It wanted to be this huge thing. It wanted to capitalize on the Marvel success. I understand that, but you got to start small. How did Marvel start? Iron Man and Hulk. And they simply told an Iron Man and Hulk story. Now, it varies in quality between the two movies, but ultimately they stayed within, we're going to just do an Iron Man film and we're going to just do a Hulk film. If we succeed, we can expand on more and more stories later on. Focus on doing a good PR movie, then worry about making it into a franchise later. What's the point of going for the whole cinematic universe when you failed to start one?